Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in internet shitlords, and today I am actually doing a video in a certain way on the request of Venger Satanis. So this is the story. Venger had produced this set of chalt cards. I don't know how else to put them. His response to the safety cards, like the X card. And he did a product, and he sent me an email, and he said, I want you to review these, right? And I said, well, they're not a print edition product. I can't review them. And he said, oh, come on, or something like that, right? And I said, well, if I do review them, it's not going to be very favorable, And he said, I don't care, go for it. All right. So I am now reviewing Venger's special chalt cards. I'll try to put a link in the description. He's got them on. He's got them available on DriveThru. I believe it's a free product. I'm pretty sure that's what they are. So this is a kind of a labor of love, I guess, on Venger's part. It's not even pay what you want, which, I don't really quite get that. But okay. So Venger's made these cards that on the back of each card, it has the weird chalt symbol and a bunch of weirdo colors. And then on the front, these cards each have a slightly different, they have a different word. There's 8 cards in total. And the words are things like Gonzo, Eldritch Sorcery, pop culture. I think science fantasy is one of them. I think gore is one or something like that. So they're all different kind of, I guess what you could say are themes that appear in Gonzo's style, on his particular Gonzo style of play, right? And the idea that he has is that instead of people putting out X cards, what you do is when you want more of something, so if you want more... I really should have kept that piece of paper where I had written down what the different things were, but I don't have it on me right now, and I can't exactly stop this video to check what the names were. But let's say that one of them for sure is Gonzo, right? So you want more Gonzo. So that's when you lift up, you pause the session, and you hold up the Gonzo card that demands that the DM make the game more Gonzo than it already is, Or if you want it to be more science fantasy, okay, if you want more like tentacle horror, then you put out the tentacle horror card. And in theory, I guess there could be an infinite number of these cards. Venger picked 8 that fit his thing. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't invent more of your own or something, and that other people couldn't come up with other things like this for other games. Now, here's why I think all of this is pretty damn stupid, okay? For 2 reasons. The first is because Venger is doing this directly as a anti-woke countermeasure to the infiltration of woke things like these, safety tools and X cards. And I get that, but basically he's doing it just to piss off the libs, right? And this is not helping. It's not any better if the right wing comes in to propagandize RPGs for their culture war than if the left wing comes in to propagandize RPGs for their culture war, right? The whole deal of stuff like the OSR is to stand against the politicization of games, not to say, oh, well, our politics are what we want here, or we don't want your politics, so we're going to do the opposite politics, right? The way we beat the wokeists is by making better games. And those games can have, of course, inside them themes that they would never put in theirs because this would be, problematic for them, So like themes like, the religious, monotheism and Christianity being promoted, or, to have a world that is set or based on actual real-world mythology or history, which they find too problematic. Products being written on other cultures by people who who do not have the magic blood of that culture and have only studied them for 20 years, and studied their history and social history and religion for decades, they would never dare to do that, and all sorts of other stuff. Like they don't have any sense of humor anymore, right? They're not capable of writing a fun Gonzo setting. They could do one that was like, oh my God, so random, right? But that would be it. That would be the limit of their ability. They couldn't do anything that would actually be like, gut-breakingly funny, because to be funny, you have to offend, right? In some way or another. You have to do something totally ridiculous that ends up that somebody would be bothered by, right? And they're just not capable of that. So making the better game is the way to win. The way to win is not to start doing the opposite of what they're doing to the hobby, but doing it from the opposite political side. Now, Venger says, well, yes, he admitted, like, because I told him, look, these are the things I'm going to say, and so he admitted to me, and maybe he'll do his own video and explain it better. But he admitted to me, this is what I took from it, that yes, initially this was done as something that was basically just a way to piss off liberals for the in response to the X card, right? And I mean, I can grant, like, okay, I'm totally on board with if you have to go to a con game, right, and they have these safety tools in the con game, it would be hilarious if you go there with one of these cards, right? And so suddenly in the middle of play, you lift up the card and they're like, wait, what's that? And it was, more tentacles, bitch, something like that. That would be great. Okay, if you really want to disrupt in that way, that's fine, right? But just not in terms of like transforming that into something that is actually made into a normality of the game, right? It's not meant to be that. And we all know it's not meant to be that. Everybody who sees this immediately, anybody who's ever heard of the X card, at least, as soon as they see this, they'll know what it's for and why, right? But Venger claims that after that, he ended up really liking the idea, and he thinks it's a really good idea. So that brings me to my point number 2. This is not a really good idea. This is fundamentally what he's doing here is where he's actually, ironically, he's going backwards to where the concept of introducing the X card came from, which was story gaming, right? So story gamers had already had this idea before wokeness really took hold, right? They were going back all the way down to like 2003, 2004, 2005. Okay, this is a long time ago. Some of you might not have been adults yet or something. I don't know. But way back then, all the same people who today are the most disgusting, filthy wokeists in the hobby, the ones that are trying to destroy our hobby in every way they can, were way back then filthy, pretentious story gamers who are trying to destroy the hobby any way they could. Okay, nothing has changed except that when they realized that it wasn't going to work by like claiming that they had the superior game theory, like theory of game design. They instead, for a little while, they fell to pieces. They licked their wounds under a rock somewhere as I laughed at how I had beaten them. And then they came crawling out, suddenly waving the flags of wokeism, and made that their new means to try to come in and take over, right? So back then, before there was an X card, what there was this concept of what's called story now, which was the fundamental idea in story gaming, which was that you are not, like in a regular normal RPG, if you're playing Lion and Dragon, or you're playing in the World Last Night, you're playing DCC, you're playing Arrows of Indra, whatever it is you're playing, you are playing a player character, right? And that character is who you are in the world. And the rest of the world is being run by the DM, and the DM decides what happens in the world. Right? You're not the one who decides what happens in the world, except for your own character's actions. What they were saying is, no, that's wrong, right? Because the whole point of a role-playing game is to create a story collaboratively. And if you're going to create a story collaboratively, it means that everybody has to have the power to overrule the DM and add to the story as they go along. Story now, not story later. Right, which story later was what they termed for what is actually like basically normal RPGs, which they said was that the problem with it was that there was no way to actually generate a story, right? So either you had to leave it all to chance, which is actually what is supposed to happen in RPGs, right? Or the DM has to be like this iron-fisted dictatorial author, right? The DM as the writer, as the storyteller, who has this novel or this movie in his head, and he forces you, right? And so they didn't like that. And so what they created were games that had special moves or special moments or special points that players would use to suddenly freeze the game, just like the X card does, right? Freeze the game and then change something, right? So they can add something or change something. They can say, well, freeze the game. Okay, so I'm about to be, arrested by the king, but I'm going to use my story action point to say that the king suddenly realizes I'm his long lost cousin, and then so the DM has to rewrite the entire world so that your character was the king's long lost cousin, So this poison turned into the poison of the X card. You can see how the mechanic is the same. You raise the X card, it's your point, it's your story point but you're using it. They're using it now. What they had already used as a tactic to try to harm the way RPGs work in terms of the play. They were creating this false narrative that the point of RPGs is to craft a story, which it is not. The point of RPGs is to create a living world, a world that is actually real in this level of the symbolic, but that it is absolutely real in that it has a life of its own. It's not just a pastiche. It's not just a Potemkin village, a facade that you use to tell the story of the DM or the story of the players, right? It's a world that has a life of its own, and the player character should move around in this world that is alive and see living things in it and experience those living things in it. And any story that comes out of your campaign is story that happens after the fact, the same way that we create stories out of our real lives. So like if you go fishing or you go hunting or you go golfing, you end up having hunting, fishing, or golfing stories. But it's not that you go hunting to craft a story. No, you go hunting. And then because you're hunting, eventually something happens, and you come back home and you tell the story of that. And that's the story that emerges from hunting. That's the sort of story that emerges from RPGs. It should never be intentionally planned, because the second you do that, you can't have a real world and an intentionally planned story. You get to pick one or the other. And the real world is way better because eventually it goes out of everybody's control. And once it does, once it's a thing of its own, all of a sudden you have this depth of the world that is so much different than everything else, right? So this is why the story interruption thing is not good. And Venger somehow, he may not remember those. I don't know, either because he wasn't playing at the time. I'm not sure if he was yet or not, or because, he might have smoked a lot or something, and he has no recollection, he has no conscious memory and could not be forced to testify in court that any of that happened, right? But he somehow saw the X card and he said, well, let's do this with these cards. But unfortunately, what he's done is he's essentially rediscovering a type of story gaming, right? Where any player can lift up the card and say, well, what I want is more tentacles, or what I want is more pop culture references. Yeah, because nothing makes an RPG come alive more than if suddenly you're using whatever the meme of the week is and it appears in the game, right? Like that's if you have Tom Hanks show up in the game, in the middle of the game for no reason, but that's something that's going to give it a real life and verisimilitude, right? This is a failure, right? That's where the thing fails, is that when you're using it, it's actually disrupting the ability of the players to enter into an immersion in the world and in their character, for their character to become a living person. Because as soon as you have to start thinking on the meta level, it screws everything up, for the players. So that's why I'm against it on all levels, basically. Thank you, Venger. I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to make a video talking crap about your product. I appreciate that, Haas, and I guess we'll see what you say in response. I want to make it absolutely clear to everyone, because I'm not what I wasn't going to do. And Venger didn't suggest this either. It was like to make up a fake kind of like conflict, right? I mean, I talked to Venger, he asked me to do this. I looked at these cards, and then I could have just done this video, but instead I emailed him back and I said, look, I'm going to shit on this, right? And he said, okay, sure, but and here's my counterpoint. And I'm like, okay. And then he said, maybe I'll do a video after. I'm like, all right, but I'm telling you guys all this so you know that this isn't some kind of like fake, fake rivalry or fake conflict that has been generated, right? I want you guys to know that this is absolutely transparent. And And it's me responding, doing him a favor. He wanted me to talk about it. And I think I understand exactly why, because one of the great secrets of our modern world is that there really is no such thing as bad press, right? Me talking about his Chalt cards is going to draw more attention to his Chalt cards. Now, why he cares, given that he's not making any money from it, I guess he just wants to like spread the Chalt cards. I think he's a bit crazy myself, but there we go. So anyways, I guess that's everything for today. I'm probably going to do a live stream on Sunday, but there still could be certain things that might force me to cancel. So, but keep your eyes open. Click the notification bell on this account if you haven't yet, because that way you get, at least hopefully you get, and it's not even always certain, but hopefully you'll get notified that I'm doing a live stream or before I'm doing a live stream. So hit that notification bell. Share this video anywhere you think people will find it interesting or anywhere you think people will get pissed off by it. And if you want Venger's cards, I'll put the link in the description. If you want to support me, check out all of my products, including like, mythical, authentic stuff like Arrows of Indra. And if you like Gonzo, if you've got Chalt and you're a fan of Chalt, check out World of the Last Sun and the Gonzo Fantasy Companion, because those are my Gonzo setting. And it's a different Gonzo setting than Venger's. There are a lot of things in common, but there's also differences. And you can tell that overall there's a slightly different style. Both of them are insane worlds, right? They're both crazy kind of... the sort of worlds that are fueled from people who did a lot of drugs in their 20s, right? But they have a slightly different take from each other in terms of style. And you might like one or you might like the other, but the good news is that they're OSR, so they're compatible. You can use them both. So if you like Chalt, check out World of the Last Sun and check out the Gonzo Fantasy Companion. And don't forget Cults of Chaos if you're looking to make villain groups for your OSR game. You have basically that book is an entire generator for villain groups where it takes you less than 10 minutes to make a group of villains, and you will never make the same one twice. So yeah, check it out. It's my hidden gem. It's probably the best book I ever wrote. Anyways, that's going to be everything for today. Keep an eye for Sunday. And currently smoking nothing because I've just gotten out of the shower. So that's it for today.